There's been some recent events that have brought a lot of things back to my memory and been piecing things together. And so I thought about developing a timeline of events that have transpired over the past 5 years that have got us to where we are in the city of Newcastle with the recent statement by the mayor coming out against the SB 1 or Senate Bill 1 dealing with property taxes, and then the announcement that here in the next few months there will be some layoffs in the EMS department. I begin to think, okay, how did we get here? Because you remember during the election, we were told how great everything was. But then in 2024, we started noticing that we started having to borrow money. And to be quite honest, many of the things that I predicted began to come to pass because if you remember during the campaign, I said that because of if I put it bluntly, I said something to the effect of if poor financial management didn't change, what that would lead to is less effective and efficient services. You're dealing with your infrastructure, your water, your sewage, things of that nature, the roads. We've noticed this is the second year in a row now that we won't have paved roads. We begin to throw patch into manhole areas, just things like that. We're literally just kind of patching things to keep things going. And then, I talked about there'll be increased fees, which we saw that. There'll be increased taxes, which we saw that. And then ultimately we could end up having layoffs. And it looks like we're going to see that. So how did we get here, though? That's the thing, because the past is a good predictor of the future. And so that's why I believe the past is important. So I put together a timeline, and basically, before I get into this, I'm going to read a lot of it because I know myself and I get to rambling, and I'm going to say some very blunt things, and I don't want to get off on my statements because I want to be very clear and very precise with my statements, because when we say things, we are held accountable for those things, even for years to come. So we have to be very careful what we say, because especially when we go on public record. So I want to be very careful with the things I say. So I did write a bunch of stuff out. Now, this video, as you can probably already tell by the length of it, it's going to be long. But if you're interested in how we got here, if you've been following, if you're interested in what's been said in the past, again, we're going to look at a timeline over about 5 years and very brief segments in those 5 years. And basically, it's kind of divided into three parts. There's before the election in 2023, things that were done and said. There's during the election, things that were done and said. And now there's post-election, which was last year and the beginning of this year so far, of things that have been done and said. And if you notice from the beginning, which will start in 2020, from the beginning, there's been a lot of statements made that have kind of went back and forth, and we're starting to see a pattern. Patterns eventually develop. I won't get into that too much because I wrote it down in my statement. So I'm not going to pretend like I can memorize this or like I'm going to try to look good for the camera. I'm literally going to be reading a lot of this again, because I don't want to make any I don't want to make any errors, and I want to be precise, and I don't want to get off track. So if you want to come along for the ride, I'm going to give a timeline of how we got here, 2020 through currently in 2025. All right. So I'm going to begin. Before I get into the subject matter of this video, I want to give a quick, realistic expression of where we're at. So we can do nothing about the current elected officials, all right? Because even after I make this video, there'll probably be people comment. I've had people seen comments before about let's get them all out of office, and we need to kick them all out, things like that. There's nothing we can do about it. Like these are the people that got voted in. They won the election in 2023, and we have them as our elected officials until at least December 31st, 2027, because these are the individuals that the majority of the voting public wanted. So that's what we got. So though we have experienced a frustrating couple of years, this is kind of my disclaimer. Lashing out at elected officials in derogatory comments only fuel emotional responses. It provides a little bit of entertainment online for some, but it really doesn't accomplish anything. Okay, so I'm not doing this to stir up derogatory comments, and I'm not doing this to be sarcastic. I sometimes sarcasm is funny, but honestly, sarcasm doesn't do much to solve problems. So, and even what I read here, I'm not trying to make personal attacks. I'm simply stating this is who said what, this is who did what over the past 5 years. So, what will accomplish something is simply this: knowing the truth, acknowledging the reality of our situation, holding elected officials accountable during this time. We can do that. We can hold them accountable. And for some of you, what you can do during this time is begin to prepare for your run for office in 2027. That is the next election. So we will need good quality candidates. The recent remarks by our mayor to gather support to oppose Indiana Senate Bill 1, which provides for a drop in property taxes and sets a tighter limit to local government spending, and the announcement of layoffs soon to come to our EMS department, rekindled a desire in me to look at how the past few years have went for us. Because people and organizations develop patterns. No individual or organization can portray themselves to be something conflicting with truth on a consistent basis. So what caught many of us as being off a little in the mayor's statement was this. He said, Newcastle is experiencing an exciting period of revitalization. This statement would have not sparked resentment if it had been made in the, say, 2012 to 2018 timeline. Another statement that caught my attention was this. As a rapidly developing community, we need the flexibility to adjust our tax levies to match our population growth and increased service demands. The words rapidly developing and population growth stood out. I suppose rapidly developing could be more of a perception-based claim, but population growth is a data point that can be looked up. So I did a simple search on the internet and found that our population has actually declined. So using this idea that we need to adjust our tax levies to match our population growth, honestly, that would mean we need to reduce it because our population growth has been negative. So we need to reduce it. We need to reduce our tax levy. Anyways, 2011 population was roughly 17,968. That was the year right before Mayor York took office. He won big in that election in 2011. So then look at a few years later, 9 years later, 2020. It went from 17,900 to 17,396. Again, these are approximate numbers. 4 years later, just last year, 2024 is recorded in most data points as going down even a little more than 2020, down to 17,306. So in the big picture, we're declining. So this could normally, these statements about rapid population growth by an elected leader, especially an executive of the city, could normally be passed off as an excited leader wanting to spark zeal among the people for the work ahead. We could get that, right? However, the reason I take issue with it is because we're now beginning to see a pattern that has developed. The pattern that, I'm going to tell you this, but then we find out later what was said isn't quite accurate. So the last statement that he made that draws a comment from me is simply this. He said, as Newcastle continues to welcome new residents and businesses, Senate Bill 1 would severely constrain our ability to provide essential services to match this expansion. Okay? So SB 1 has not passed yet. Okay? But we already have difficulty financing essential services. Our water infrastructure is constantly problematic. Our wastewater plant needs a $30+ million update, and that is in the mayor's own words that he stated himself in 2023. And actually, that's the amount that the superintendent reported in 2021. So we know the cost is much higher now. And then we have other drainage problems around the city that I won't even go into right now. All right. So these things have been a constant. And I didn't even say the roads, but the roads even, we've had some issues with certain roads. Some roads get taken care of on a regular basis, but there's others that seem to suffer disproportionately. Anyhow, so those issues have been a thorn in the side for quite some time now. But now we're talking about laying off employees. This is all happening before SB 1 passes. Okay. So with our current inability to financially manage what we have, I actually suppose I would agree with Mayor York on the comment that it would hurt us, or he said it would constrain us, right? It'd greatly constrain us. So SB 1, yeah, here it is. This is where I agree with Mayor York on this. SB 1 would severely constrain our ability. Yes, it would, because it caps our tax levy, right? Because it would tighten the ability for the city to increase the annual budget at the current rate of increase that it's used to. Though this statement is true, to bring transparency to the issue, more money does not correct financial management problems. So seeing that we once again have a budgetary problem, laying off people is a budgetary problem because that budget just passed just a few months ago. Okay. So within the first quarter of the year, we're talking about laying people off. So I looked back at something I said during a council meeting and that I posted about right before the council passed the 2025 budget. So there was a statement that I had made at a council meeting. I believe I posted it, and I asked a question when I was at the meeting. That was in the mid-October, 1st of October, mid-October. I think the 1st of October. Anyways, here is the article that I read actually for the first time just the other day. So as I read this article and rehashed that meeting that happened last October, right before the council passed the 2025 budget, it caused me to see the bigger picture, or see this pattern that is developing. So this is I'm going to read directly from the newspaper article about that meeting. This is from an October article in the Courier Times. Clay Morgan was the Republican candidate for mayor in 2023. During his campaign, Morgan asked multiple questions about the city of Newcastle's financial health and ongoing budget deficits. Morgan referred back to that time during Monday's council meeting. And in quotes, he quoted me saying this: there was an exuberant confidence 2 months prior to the 2024 by many, there was an exuberant confidence 2 months prior to 2024 by many Newcastle elected officials. However, in spite of that confidence, 2024 witnessed the city of Newcastle borrowing a total of $4.3 million to meet payroll and just to pay the bills. Then, it says this, he pointed out that the city council has also increased utility rates this year and, along with the Henry County Council, increased income tax, and in quotes, to a population with a median household income of a meager $47,000 annually. That was the quote that I stated in the council meeting. I found out there are a couple reports out there that say it's around 48,000, the median household income. So somewhere around 47 to 48. Morgan asked the city council members to also consider that Newcastle government overspent its revenue. Okay, and this is where we need to start tracking. Newcastle government overspent its revenue by $1 million in 2022. That's right before the election year, and by 2.6 million, overspent by 2.6 million in 2023. That was the election year. And this overspending came from a category that's called governmental activities. That is all the functions of the city of Newcastle except for water and wastewater, the utilities, and stormwater. Those three are different functions. So in 2023, we overspent by 2.6 million. And then, this is what I quoted. Again, this is what I said. The recent income tax increase will do very little to help in the overspending. Almost all of that tax will go toward pay raises for the first responder services over a 3-year period of time. He also said the utility rate increases will not help with overspending, because the only thing that I am aware of that's being done differently in 2024 in an attempt to help budget year 2025 is the health insurance adjustments. Another concerning issue to me is that the city has functioned most of this year with inaccurate fund balances and still may be. Because what we found out is almost all of 2023, the money that was reported as fund balances was inaccurate. Their reporting was completely off. And therefore, because of that, because they didn't have a financial baseline for 24, they functioned almost all of 2024 with no accurate fund balances. I think it went until November of 2024 before Baker Tilly was finished and we actually had accurate fund balances so we could actually see where we were at. And that's what I'm wondering is they might have actually passed the budget before knowing accurate fund balances. So they were close, but anyways, it may have actually passed it without knowing. But anyways, let me move on so I don't ramble. Then I said this: nearly 1 year has passed since the public expressions of confidence. And then I asked a question. I said this: do the elected officials still positively confident as we head into 2025? The next statement in the article: the council members did not offer direct comments to Morgan's statement or question. I stood there for a couple seconds in silence. Nobody answered anything. Nobody said anything. I said, okay. Actually, my statement was, I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. I said, let the record show there's no response or something like that. So, but here's some things that as I read the article that I remembered is this. Earlier in the meeting, this is again, I'm reading from the newspaper article. Earlier in the meeting, City Council President Rex Peckinpah explained to the audience that Newcastle is categorized as a third-class city. Under that categorization, the council's job is to approve the budget each year and then give it to the mayor and the administration to spend. Then he said this: the city council does not control the spending of the mayor. Councilman Coger then added this. Councilman Coger said Monday that the city council has appropriately budgeted close to what the city's insurance agent has estimated annual costs to be. Then I quote, the newspaper quotes, excuse me. The newspaper then quotes Councilman Coger saying this, and this is what really sparked some things. The reason we're $9 million in debt, talking about the health insurance fund specifically, is because the administration has moved that money and paid for other things instead of insurance. It's not the council, it's out of our control. And then he says, I'm telling you, this is what has happened for the last 6.5 years. It was not paid. We had the money. It was in this budget book every year, not paid, and now we're in debt, and it keeps increasing every year. I want to make a few points about this particular council meeting. All right, now I'm off the article, or not reading from the article. One thing that I did not mention is this. This also happened in the meeting, but I didn't it wasn't in the article, and so I haven't read it or talked about it yet. I talked about this in the meeting. I don't think I've talked about this publicly. But anyways, one thing that I did not mention is that just days prior to the meeting, the mayor, clerk treasurer, and city council president were in attendance with the State Board of Accounts to discuss the annual audit report. That happened right before the meeting that we just talked about. Okay. So during the council meeting, the mayor made a statement about that annual State Board of Accounts meeting. And he said this: the State Board of Accounts regularly audits the city finances and recently completed a review of the accounts. And then he said 8 ways till Tuesday. In other words, they went very thoroughly through the books. Then he said this: there are no write-ups. I had not prepared to say anything that night about the annual audit, but when I heard him publicly announce this from his official capacity as the one responsible to, according to Indiana Code, the executive shall ensure efficient government of the city, I did that night bring a slight rebuttal to his proclamation in addition to the already stated comments. When given the opportunity, I stated that is not true, that there are no problems within the audit report. Then I quoted one paragraph from the report which states, and this is in many of them for years, it says this, quote from the State Board of Accounts: the city had not designed or implemented a system of internal controls which would include appropriate segregation of duties that would likely be effective in preventing or detecting and correcting errors related to cash and investments, including bank reconciliations, to ensure the accuracy and completeness of the ledger. The report also states several items which needed correction. And then I made the comment that maybe this is why we continue to have so many problems with our budget. I then reminded everyone present in the room that we did get placed on the State Board of Accounts in need of corrective action list. This was the result of the massive health insurance deficit. So they finally put Newcastle on the in need of corrective action list. To these statements, again, this is what's important. Again, we're developing patterns here. We're trying to figure out, okay, who's been accurate in delivering their information. All right. To these statements that I made in front of them, I received no rebuttal from any elected official. Again, a pattern is starting to develop. Now, so I want to dissect a few statements in the article to show a further pattern. First, I made some very bold claims that during that meeting. I made some very bold claims during that meeting, even asking for a response. I have served as an elected official, and this would have been a great opportunity to set the record straight from an official capacity, making sure it was publicly recorded for future reference. So as an elected official, this was a great opportunity to give a straightforward rebuttal to anything I said and set the record straight and make sure it was documented in the public account of that meeting for future reference. However, as stated in the article, the council members did not offer direct comments to Morgan's statement or question. So there was no rebuttal at all to anything I said. The second thing to point out is because it exposed a pattern is the statement made by Council President and Finance Committee member Rex Peckinpah. Okay, this will start to make more sense as we get down the road. And I know I'm taking a long time, but the city council, he said this, the city council does not control the spending of the mayor. This is the statement that is continually made by council members when there's financial issues. Is this statement true? Yes. As I repeatedly said during the mayor campaign, given our size of population, we are classified by the state of Indiana to be a city where the majority of responsibility for financial health is placed upon the mayor. Right? I've said that all along. However, one major check and balance that the council does possess is that they pass or decline the annual budget presented by the mayor. If the council rejects the budget, it automatically reverts back to the previous year's budget. Okay. Now, the next part of the article is where my mind filled with past to present information. Here's where I believe the patterns of behavior really begin to reveal themselves. It was a statement made by Councilman Mark Koger concerning health insurance deficit when he said, the reason we're $9 million in debt is because the administration has moved that money and paid for other things instead of insurance. It's not the council. It's out of our control. I'm telling you, this is what has happened for the last 6.5 years. I know I've read this already, but this is important. This is what's happened for the last 6.5 years. It was not paid. We had the money. It was in this budget book every year, not paid, and now we're in debt, and it keeps increasing every year. Mark's statement was very revealing, because out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. The one sentence that brought everything back to my mind was when he said, I'm telling you, this is what has happened for the last 6.5 years. What significant event took place approximately 6.5 years ago that pertains to the health insurance fund, the annual budget, and the city deficit? That is what we will talk about when we start the next video